Alright, before we get started with today's video, I just want to tell you guys right now that no, this is not a shot-for-shot recreation of the original Jurassic Park from, the actual movie. This is a culmination of several pictures and maps and videos that were obviously from the movie that I used as references to kind of help me make this as movie accurate as possible. But just know that it's not 100% movie accurate. When you take a look at things individually, all the placements and whatnot, it will look somewhat accurate. But when you take a look at it from a grand scale, obviously the park itself is not 100% accurate to the actual movie. Obviously, when it comes to spacing on Isla Nublar in the game, I don't have a lot of space to work with, so I just kind of work with what I had, as we all do when it comes to this game. So please don't go down in the comments below bitching about how this is not a shot-for-shot recreation when you know damn well that it's not gonna. Yeah, I just thought I'd let you guys know that. Also, if you're under the age of 13, get the fuck off this video. Alright, let's get started. Alright, obviously we're gonna go ahead and get started with the helipad. Now, the helipad had its issues and was probably one of the more difficult things to recreate, but at the end of the day, it was probably the one I was most proud of in terms of recreating the park. It was one of the ones I feel like I got movie accurate the most, along with maybe a couple of other, locations. But as far as recreating the park, I feel like the helipad was probably one of my best recreations. Yes, obviously, again, it did have its issues, like getting the Jeeps being stationary in that area without, the ranger station having to be so close. I was able to find a way around that. It's just one of those situations where I kind of had to work around a certain obstacle to make it happen, and the overall thing doesn't look good, and obviously it results in those stupid little icons hovering above the screen. I could always take those off, but I've always tried to make my park 100% perfect to where there's absolutely nothing wrong as far as paths go. But I did have to work around a couple things to make certain things possible and certain things happen, so I kind of made a couple exceptions to that rule, and these ranger stations were obviously one of them. But as far as the actual helipad, obviously the whole thing is not completely accurate, because as you know, the helipad was just a helipad alone. It wasn't this entire arrival station, and obviously there was a waterfall in the background, and a bunch of cliff areas. Obviously I couldn't get everything 100% accurate, but I'm very proud of this build right here. Also, if you move along down the road a little bit from the helipad, the arrival station, you'll go through the gates that the original characters had to go through in the Jeeps, that little area that pretty much puts you officially inside the park. Now, it's nothing special, it's a very simple build and there's not much to it, but I think overall it looks pretty good, I guess. If you move down more along the path, you'll see that I also created a little hotel area for our guests. And when it comes to things like this, we didn't really get a good look at what the hotel or village area looked like for the guests of Jurassic Park. So all of that was kind of left up to interpretation. So I kind of just did my own thing with it, and I made it just an entire little area. I made like a little beach area behind the actual hotels. That way, it gives a nice little aesthetic to our guests. I put pretty much everything here, including the cafe, the diner, and the bathroom, and whatever else we were pretty much given in this newest DLC. So, I kind of made do with what I had, and I just kind of made a little simple area that looks pretty good. I also put a little shelter there, just again for looks, because I'm on Sandbox. So, it's not like anything is going to really happen. Anyways, let's go on to the visitor center. As you can see, the visitor center again is a fairly simple build. Just a placement and everything looks movie accurate. It's just one of those things where the simplicity of it can go a very long way. And again, it's just a very simple build, but it's one that I'm probably most proud of in terms of how accurate I got it. Now, I say accurate, but in reality nothing here is going to be 100% accurate. So yes, while I do feel like I did a pretty decent job with this, no, I do not feel like it's 100% accurate. But, again, I feel like I did a good job. I'm very satisfied with the overall build, and I think at the end that's all that matters. Moving on from the visitor center, we also have, of course, the Jurassic Park gates. Now, when it comes to the Jurassic Park gates, it brought up a lot of issues. The first one being the fact that it's facing the wrong way, and that bothered me a lot. And apparently, the Jurassic Park gates only face one way. So yes, that's good to know for future reference, but the fact that it only faces one way and you literally can't fix it to, you know, face a different way is very annoying and something that I really don't like. And, you know, it's just little things like this, you know, being able to switch back, the gate is just one of those little things that can go a long way. And I feel like that's just one little tiny thing that needs fixing, along with the direction that the Ford Explorers are going. Now, technically, if you were to take a look at the pictures and videos of the actual movie, the Ford Explorers are going in the correct direction, but in the placement of my park, the way I have it, they're not going in the exact direction that I want them to. They're going through the tour completely backwards. So when it comes to the Ford Explorers and the placement of the tracks and the direction the gate is facing, all of that is just little issues that I was having throughout the recreation of this park, and little things that really bug me, and I really wish I could just go back and fix these, but again, I can't because of the way Frontier made these things. I can't just change up the tracks, I can't just change up the direction the Ford Explorer is going, I can't change the direction that the gate is facing, and honestly, when it came to the tracks and the paths, that was probably one of the more difficult things to do in the game, is the placing of those tracks and paths, because I didn't know 100% where to put them, so I kind of had to work with the maps and pictures that were provided to me on the internet. But other than that, all I can do was this. This is the best I can do, so I do apologize for that because it doesn't look good, and if there's anything dissatisfying about this recreation, it has to be that. But moving on, we go through our first exhibit, our first dinosaur, the Dilophosaurus, of course. And this Dilophosaurus enclosure is very simple. And, you know, like everything else, I did my best to make it somewhat movie accurate. Again, it's just pretty much impossible to do that. But I'd say it's a solid try for something that's very simple and something that we didn't get a very good look at in the movie. You know, obviously, again, the enclosure itself is very simple. I'm not even sure how many Dilophosaurs there were, so I just put in a few. Overall, there's just not a whole lot to this enclosure, so, you know, again, it's nothing special. So moving on, we go into the Triceratops enclosure, where I didn't really know how, you know, when it comes to these movies, I don't really know how many dinosaurs are in these enclosures. We've only really seen them individually, so I'm just gonna assume that there were more than one because I put in a few Triceratops. Of course, I put in the one Triceratops with the 1993 skin variation, so, you know, that it's a step towards being movie accurate. I mean, all I need to do is tranquilize it and keep it down for the longest time, which I'm not going to do because that's just cruel. But really, I just felt like there wasn't a need to put it down like that. So I'm just going to go ahead and, you know, leave it be rather than just keeping it down, because I know that some people would probably take it to that extent to make their park look as accurate as possible. But I'm just going to keep it like that. Next to the Triceratops enclosure, we actually have the Herrera Source enclosure, because according to one of the maps that I actually used as a reference to recreate this park, it did say that there was also a Herrera Source enclosure, and that it was somewhere behind the visitor center, and apparently next to the Triceratops enclosure, somewhere next to the Triceratops enclosure. This was the same one that pretty much said that there was also a raptor enclosure between the Herrera Source and the Triceratops enclosure, which I don't think was the case in the movie. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that the more movie accurate map is the one that we actually saw maybe on screen. I think that's just common knowledge. If you just see an actual map in the movie, then that's probably the map that you should work with, because that's probably the one that's most movie accurate. Anyways, I still didn't want to exclude the Herrera Source from the island, because according to other sources, Herrera Source was one of the dinosaurs that were still in Jurassic Park, but just one that we didn't see actually on screen in the movies. But I still decided to add Herrera Source along with a few other dinosaurs that we didn't see on screen in Jurassic Park, because according to these maps, these other dinosaurs were still part of Jurassic Park. So, and you'll just see them throughout this showcase. But actually, speaking of which, moving on, right next to the Triceratops enclosure from the other side is the Metrocampus Source enclosure, because according to the map, the Metrocampus Source enclosure was, it looked like it was basically a part of the Triceratops enclosure, but it was basically closed off, making it an enclosure of its own. But it was just weird how the overall shape of that enclosure was. So I just tried to make it somewhat accurate to the actual map, and decided to include it. Obviously, the Metrocampus Source is again another dinosaur that didn't really show up in the movie, so I'm assuming its default skin is the skin that is Jurassic Park accurate. So I decided just to put it in like that. It's a very small, very simple build. There's not a whole lot to them in terms of what's actually in them, as all of these. It just has very simple things. But moving on from these, we obviously have the queen herself, the Tyrannosaurus Rex. We have her enclosure, which is one of the larger ones, and ones I really didn't know what to do with in terms of what to put in it, because I felt like when it came to the more movie accurate stuff and the stuff that was actually seen in the movie, I felt like I could work with and actually put stuff in there. But when it came to the T-Rex enclosure, there wasn't a whole lot I could actually put in there, other than, of course, a goat feeder that the T-Rex obviously would eat from. But even that, it just made it so there's a bunch of goats running around in the entire enclosure, so that kind of backfired. And not to mention the fact that the T-Rex just wouldn't eat the damn goats, and it was basically starving itself. It got really annoying, so I had to put in a different feeder, one that was stationary, so that the T-Rex can actually go and eat it. But what can I say? These dinosaurs are fucking dumb. But I still love the T-Rex. Obviously, it's a 1993 variation. It's amazing. I absolutely love it. As far as the actual, outside of the enclosure, the bathrooms, the tracks, the goat feeder, I try to make all of that somewhat accurate. I put the goat feeder right next to the fence on the other side of the fence from the actual tracks, where it's viewable from the actual Ford Explorers, just like it was in the movie. I also put a bathroom not too far away from the Ford Explorers, so that way again it's somewhat movie accurate. And of course, I failed to mention this, but I had fun with the signs, of course, that we were given in this newest DLC / update / whatever, and I absolutely love all of these. And of course, I try to position it correctly to make it look, again, somewhat movie accurate. So yeah, when you take a look at these things individually, they definitely look movie accurate. But when you look at it from a grand scale, when you look at it from the outside, it may not look 100% correct. But again, I worked with what I had, and I honestly do like the T-Rex enclosure. And of course, we can't forget the Velociraptor enclosure, which initially I was just gonna put the Velociraptor pen in the middle of and just put the raptors inside the pen. But I thought that was no fun. I want to be able to see the raptors. I don't want them just trapped inside the pen. And initially I was just going to put this enclosure between the Herrera Source and the Triceratops, like that map I just showed you. But I instead just decided to do this. That way we could get a better view of the raptors. And this way I could just add in more, because, if I were to do it the other way, the raptors would be super cramped. And, I get it. It's sandbox mode. I could alter the dinosaur's behavior if I want, but I want it to be somewhat accurate. I want it to be somewhat good for the dinosaurs' comfortability, even though, again, it is on sandbox. But I want it to look somewhat realistic. And I decided, instead of just adding the Jurassic Park Velociraptors, I know that it's against, this whole recreation, but I decided to add in all variations of the Velociraptors, because they were the ones I wanted to see pretty much the most. And I have to say, I'm very impressed with all the skin variations. I absolutely love them, and I just want all my raptors inside this enclosure. But I decided to add the pen anyways, just for looks, which is basically the only purpose it actually serves. So yeah, there's that. But yeah, overall, this enclosure, like all the other ones, is a very basic build. And I added some of the stuff from the movies into this enclosure. I applied it to make it look very realistic, but overall it's probably not the most accurate thing, which, at this point I think I'm just fine with. Alright, moving on to the next dinosaur, we have the Baryonyx. And this is another dinosaur that was not mentioned in the movie or seen, but it was still apparently, according again to even the movie accurate map, was still a part of Isla Nublar of Jurassic Park. And the build of the enclosure itself is very weird. It's one that, it was probably the one I liked the least. I didn't really like this build at all, but I still wanted to include all of the dinosaurs that were a part of these maps, so I decided to include the Baryonyx. And honestly, you know what, it's not as bad as I'm probably making it seem like, but again, it's just a very weird build in my opinion. But honestly, this enclosure is not important because compared to the other enclosure that I'm about to show you, one that I really do like, it makes the Baryonyx enclosure looks like absolute crap. But the enclosure that is probably my favorite one, and one that I absolutely love, is the one that contains pretty much all of the herbivores in the park. And you know, that includes things like the Brachiosaurus, the Proceratosaurus, the Gallimimus, and Stegosaurus, which was, apparently they weren't in Jurassic Park, not even on, you know, obviously I think they were on Isla Sorna, but I'm just working with these maps, and apparently these maps indicate that Stegosauruses were on the island, on, you know, Isla Nublar in the time of Jurassic Park, so I just added them anyways. And yeah, they're kind of chilling around in the park, along with the Gallimimus, and according to the map, they were in the lower regions of Isla Nublar, so I did my best to try to keep certain dinosaurs away from each other, just for the sake of, you know, accuracy of these maps. So I try to keep the Gallimimus and the Stegosaurus down in the lower regions of the island, while keeping the rest, you know, the Brachiosaurus and the Proceratosaurus on the upper regions of the island, more of the basically the heart of the island, basically in the middle right there. So I did my best to kind of keep them separated, and for the most part it did work. But you know, obviously there's going to be some sort of mix at some point, so that's kind of beyond my control. And of course, you know, it is possible that these are two separate enclosures, but I thought, why make it two separate enclosures? Just make it one big one and let them kind of live in harmony. And honestly, I like that I did that, because it honestly looks very beautiful, and I actually, again, it's my favorite enclosure out of everything so far. And of course I decided to add compies to this enclosure, but the compies, when it comes to the compies, I added them pretty much everywhere except of course the smaller carnivores enclosures, because you know, smaller carnivores can eat Compsognathus, but for the most part the Compsognathus just kind of run around free on the island, even in the guest areas, even though the guests are scared of the Compsognathus, despite the fact that Compsognathus literally cannot kill them or hurt them in any way. But whatever, the guests are scared of them, I really don't care. It's sandbox. It's not like it's gonna affect anything. So, you know, it's just cool just to see these, you know, small little creatures kind of running around your park. And I added so many of them. I don't even know how much I've added. I think I added like well over 50 of them. Continuing on with this enclosure, I tried my best to recreate the actual setting for when we see the Brachiosaurus for the very first time, which is basically the first dinosaur that we officially see on the island. And obviously I couldn't recreate the scene itself. I just don't have that kind of patience. But I did try to recreate the setting as best as possible. I think I did a pretty good job with it, you know, recreating the pond and the forest in the background, and adding the Parasaurolophus herd and all of the Brachiosaurus. I think I did a good job with that, and I'm very proud of that recreation. But moving on from this enclosure, next to the enclosure, according to the maps that I was using, there's also a Proceratosaurus enclosure that's next to the Brachiosaurus enclosure. And I am not 100% sure if that is the accurate placing for it, because the other maps say that the Dilophosaurus are apparently supposed to be there. I'm just going to go ahead and just say that that is the Proceratosaurus enclosure. And of course, this is another dinosaur that just wasn't ever mentioned or seen in the actual Jurassic Park movie, but was apparently on the actual island. And yeah, so I decided to include them anyways, and they look okay. I mean, the enclosure itself is nothing special, and when it comes to all of these enclosures for dinosaurs in the movies that we just haven't seen, I just did fuck all with them. I just made them very basic, simple enclosures. I didn't really do anything with them because that wasn't my main focus of this recreation. I literally was trying to recreate all of the various scenes that we've seen in Jurassic Park. As far as placement or inside the enclosures go, I wasn't trying to be too specific with them when it comes to these dinosaurs. So yeah, that was just my intentions, but that's pretty much the end of our dinosaur tour right there. That was pretty much all of the dinosaurs on the island. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this little tour of my recreation of Jurassic Park. I figured what better way to end off this decade and start anew than to revisit something that everyone in this community has grown up with, and that is the original Jurassic Park. And this is just my way of saying farewell to 2019 and just the entire decade as a whole, and to starting anew in 2020. I just really wanted to end this decade off with a bang, so I hope you guys enjoy it. Hopefully I survive next year, and hopefully I'll be posting more content next year. And yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say, guys. I'm very excited, and I hope you guys have an awesome and safe New Year's. And that's pretty much all I have to say, guys. Thank you so much for watching, not just this video, but all my videos in these past few years that I've been on this platform. Thank you so much for sticking with me and this channel throughout the last 3 years. Thank you so much for that. I very much appreciate it. And hopefully we can continue this even next year in 2020. That's all I have to say for now, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and please have an awesome New Year's.